Welcome to today's podcast and welcome to the Business Learning Lounge. Lovely to have you join us today. Today's focus is going to be on teams and team development. Now, I know for a lot of leaders, this is a really important aspect of your leadership journey. And I do encourage you to really think creatively about how you lead your teams. In today's world, if you can get your teams to be energized and engaged, then they give you more effort and more contribution to what you're trying to deliver in your organization. But let's start talking about teams and the effectiveness of teams and how we best manage them. So firstly, I want to reference Tuckman's model around team development. The strategies that we use in team development depend on the stage of evolution of the team and where they're sitting at. So you don't want to use strategies for team enhancement at the wrong stage. So we want to balance that. So Tuckman's model is useful. Tuckman has 4 stages to his model. The first stage is when we're forming, we're getting together, we're getting to know each other. The second stage is the storming, where we're kind of starting to vie for power bases and all of those sorts of things. The third stage is the stage where we get to some level of normalization. That norming phase, we've ironed out all those kinks in terms of roles and responsibilities, where there are handovers and where there aren't. But to get to full performing, we have to start to actually build quality relationships. And we have to start to understand each other's personality preferences, how we like to be communicated, all of those sorts of things. So we've got to develop that nuance, which is around the people, the connection with people, to get to performing. What I've seen in the work I've done over the years, and have developed a couple of additional stages to Tuckman's model, is that even high-performing teams can get to a point at which they actually go downhill on their trajectory of performance. And that comes when they hit conformity. So if high-performing teams don't stay agile and constantly be evolving themselves and developing, they can end up in conformity. Now, unfortunately, once a team's got into conformity, if you're going to change them, you've got to actually do something drastic. And that's why the last stage that we've added to Tuckman's model is transformation. So once a team has got into conformity, what you will have to do is actually get them to a point where they are transforming. Now, that's quite hard. Once a team's in conformity, getting them out of conformity can often require some form of dramatic change, either a leadership change, or you might need to change a few players in the team to get that shift. It's very easy to see when a sports team, for example, has got into conformity, because their performance drops dramatically and they suddenly start losing games, or their special areas that they are supposed to be delivering in, they start to get worse at. Now, in business, unfortunately, that's not as dramatic. We don't always see it. But if you are looking for it, you can see that slow downhill trend towards conformity. And when you hit conformity, unfortunately, it does take quite a lot of effort. Now, let's talk about each of the stages and what we would want to be doing at different stages. So the first stage, which is the norming stage, as a leader, your job in that, the forming stage is the first stage. At that forming stage, you really want to be starting to get people to talk to each other around how their roles are interfacing. You want to have good discussions about roles and responsibilities. You want to have good discussions around handoffs of jobs. You want to get your KPIs or key performance indicators in place. You want to set your team goals and outcomes that you're going to achieve. So there's a huge amount of work to do in that first stage of forming. Unfortunately, often people get stuck in that, and then dysfunction starts to happen and we don't move through that, and we end up just going to war over roles and responsibilities. So it is the job of the leader to actually push that forming stage towards storming. In the storming stage, you will get conflict arising. This is when you as a leader really need to actually get comfortable with handling conflict, because in that storming phase, people will be vying for who's got the power base. Your job as a leader is to actually be aware of the game playing that might be going on, and actually deal with it effectively, deal with the conflict, deal with where people are dropping the ball, and actually intervene in those situations rather than just let it happen organically. We actually want to intervene, because in these first stages, if we can get it right, then the performing end will stay sustainable. So we really want to get this right, and we want to intervene. So if you're a hands-off leader, that can be a problem. You need to be involved in helping the team to iron out those issues, helping them to actually develop those norms, and really starting to help them to effectively deal with disagreements across the team. So the storming phase, as I said, is going to have some sort of conflict. You are going to end up with good, bad, and ugly going on. You as a leader need to really keep your cool in this phase and really stay alert to any game playing. Now, Eric Berne talks about game playing quite a lot. He's one of the psychologists who really helped us to understand organizations and organizational games. And he says that, during that stage of evolution, when we're in the storming stage, people actually revert to games that they learned in their childhood. So they either revert to parent behavior or child behavior. And in those teams, you will see those behaviors. So he talks about parent behavior being critical parent, looking for someone to find fault with, or nurturing parent, trying to fix everything for everyone. In those phases, that parent behavior you need to watch out for as a leader, in yourself as well as in your team. What Eric also says is that there's childlike behavior, so adapted child and free child behavior. He says the adapted child behavior looks like they're acquiescent and going to do what you say, but behind your back they're not doing it, or they're undermining your leadership. The free child, they're just going to stamp their feet and throw temper tantrums. I'm not getting what I need, and that person's not giving me what I need. And so you'll start to see these games being played out. And your job as a leader is to be aware of those games, but not get on them. You need to be the adult during that storming phase, because if you can't keep your adult behavior, then the whole team's going to disintegrate into game playing. Also, your team members will start to vie for who's your favorite. So as a leader in that storming phase, you've got to really be equitable in how you distribute your time, effort, and your resources. And get really clear with people what your expectations are of them. So that storming phase, often it's a useful thing to do, to sit down and agree some behaviors that are going to help to support us through this storming phase, and get clear about what it is that's not going to be allowed in the team. Again, this does require some active involvement from the leader's part. But remember, once you get to performing, then you can actually sit back and enjoy the performance of the team. These early two stages both require quite a lot of leadership intervention, quite a lot of leadership effort and time. And so in the first phase of the forming phase, you want to be setting those base level things around KPIs. Into the second phase, now we're starting to develop the relationships and putting some boundaries around relationships and conflict. Then into the third phase of your development of your team. Now we're into the norming phase. Now we want to actually settle things down, help people to get really clear on what their roles are, actually get them accountable. So this is where we're starting to review accountability, really helping people to actually see that they're delivering the work that they need to do. The norming phase, it's really, really important to check all our handoffs are working, so that we haven't got role overlap or duplication of effort or people doing bits of other people's job and it not working, and really do some analysis of what is and isn't working. In order to get to full performing, though, we want everyone in the team to know exactly what their part is, but also exactly what every other part of the team is doing. So this is where the relationship building comes in. We want to do lots of work collaboratively. We want to help the team to actually get really good at collaborating naturally. You want them to know each other. It's good to get to performing, to do some sort of team diagnostic, some sort of personality diagnostic. Any of those type of diagnostics are really going to help and support you to get your team to a high functioning level. Also, to get into performing, you need to actually have everyone contributing to their highest level. So you need to be doing the motivation and engagement behind the scenes. And if you listen to one of our earlier podcasts on motivation and engagement, you'll know some of the areas that you need to work on. So when we're getting to that performing stage, we want each individual in the team to be performing at a super high level, because performance requires that everyone is delivering their part in that performance. So there's a lot of work to be done to get to performing. Now, I'll come back to performing a little bit later, because I want to talk a bit about emotional intelligence in teams. But I first want to finish each of the stages. So the fifth stage of our team development, as I said, is that conformity stage. Now, if your team has hit conformity, you need to understand that you're going to have to work really hard to get them out of that. The things you'll hear in the conforming stage are things like, oh, we don't do that here, or we've tried that and it didn't work, or actually that's just how that person is, or we have found a way that works and we don't want to change it. That kind of language in a team will tell you you've hit conformity. Also, if you've got people who've been in the team doing the same job for a long time, understand that you've got a level of conformity that you might have to work on. So if it's just an individual that's got into conformity, that's easy. But if a whole team is in conformity, that's a problem. So not that long ago, I was working with a team that had been doing pretty much the same thing for a very long time. One of the team members had been in the team, same job for 42 years. Others had been there not quite as long as that, but a long time. And so what you had was a whole team in conformity, one person in particular in high levels of conformity, not wanting to change, and the organization was asking them to change the way they did things. So to move towards more of a service orientation rather than a punitive orientation in the work they did. And this was hugely challenging for them. They were not happy about it. And, that takes a lot of work. And so that team had to do a lot of work to shift and change. And in fact, in the end, the person who'd been doing the job for 42 years actually decided it was too hard and that he would retire at that stage. And that's a reality when you have got a team into conformity. Sometimes you have to change the players, the same as sports teams do. Sometimes even a good sports team becomes ineffective because players may have stayed too long and they just need a change. So reality is that if you've got into conformity, you might need to do some systemic change. Those of you who've taken over conforming teams, you'll know what I mean. If you've ever taken over a conforming team, it's hard work. But to get to transformation, you need to be much more systematic in the way you approach it. The earliest stages of team development, you can do that organically as you move through it, as long as you're making sure you're doing all those things. But in a conforming team, you want to first start with a review. So whether you get someone external to come in and review or whether you do that yourself, you need to do a base level assessment of where things are at. An assessment of the team's functionality, their ability to deliver the work, their ability to deliver what their customer wants. That might involve a customer survey, it might involve a staff survey, might involve stakeholder surveys. There's a whole range of things that could be involved in that review part. Once you've got the review, then it's actually using that review to define what strategies need to shift and what areas need to shift for the team, and systemically starting to then work on those aspects that need to be developed and changed. Each team will have a unique set of things that needs to change. So it does take quite a lot of work to get a team from conformity to transformation. Now, obviously, you want to give everyone in the team a chance to come along on that journey and to work with the team to actually get success. But reality is that if someone chooses to step away, don't be surprised, because if they don't want to make the changes that you're asking of them, then they will step away. But that transformational phase, as I say, you want to start it with a review, and then you want to wrap it up with a survey, to a reiteration of the surveys you've used in the review phase, to actually check that change has happened and that it's sustained. So generally we would say 12 months for a team, as long as it's a relatively normal sized team. Do a pre-measure and a post-measure to check that what you're doing is actually making a shift. In terms of the process that goes on, it'll be different for each team. But things that you will see generally, you'll need to realign values, you'll need to realign above the line, below the line behaviors, you'll need to set some review strategies, you'll need to set some KPIs that have very much around how we do things, but also some stretch KPIs around what we do. So those are some of the things that could pop up in your team strategy to shift the culture from conforming to transforming. Now, while it sounds like that goes in a straight line, it never does. So you might be at the performing stage and suddenly you've got a whole lot of new people coming into the team and you're thrown right back to the first stage of forming. If that happens, though, if you've done good work in setting the foundations of your team, it won't actually take long to get people on board. But you do need to, again, approach it systematically, bring people in, talk to them about what you've already set up, the KPIs, the strategy, the vision, the direction, all of those, and get them embedded in the team culture and get them embedded in the collaboration. Once you've done those, you can actually move back through the stages relatively quickly. So when we talk about team development, like everything else in organizations, requires a disciplined approach. Just knee-jerking and doing a one-day team development is not going to do anything. I'm not saying that it's not fun to do a team development day, but what I'm saying is it's not going to work if that's all you do. So you need to, if let's say you do a team development day, then over the rest of the 12 months, put in place monthly reviews or quarterly reviews or 2 monthly reviews and actually keep that team development moving forward. You can't just do one-off strategies. They really don't work. So I do encourage you to think about team development as an ongoing thing. And it does take effort and it does take work from the leader. Now, let's talk about some of those foundational things that are essential to have in place before you can actually get past that first stage of forming. So the research is really clear here. And certainly in my book, I talk about team resilience and team effectiveness. But remember that there are a number of things that need to be in place for you to get from the forming stage to the performing stage. The first thing is that you need to have a vision and clear goals as a team. That's essential. So it's the starting point. Without that, you won't get good, high-performing team outcomes. The second thing you need to do is you need to focus on results. So you need to get really focused on delivering results and actually pushing towards your goals and your vision. That focus on results requires reviews, check-ins, seeing where we're up to, all of those sorts of things. The third thing that we need in place is clear roles and responsibilities. So we need to know all those handoff points that I've talked about already, and we need to get clear on roles and responsibilities. The fourth thing that we need in place, and this is really essential, is we need effective leadership. Teams do not function without leadership. Now, I, for some reason, decided earlier on in my career that I was going to prove you could have leaderless teams. Well, I proved that that's not possible. So I proved the opposite of what I thought. You do need a leader, and it doesn't always have to be one leader. So the leadership can move around, but you need someone who, when there's disagreement that you can't move forward, someone has the captain's call and can go, hey, we're going to head in this direction. Let's all move together. So you do need leadership. As I say, it doesn't have to be always the same person, but you do need leadership in a team for it to be effective. The fifth thing that we need in place in teams for them to be high performing and to hit that high performing aspect is that we need really good active collaboration from everyone. So everyone in the team needs to be working hard to collaborate, to be a part of the team. We can't have one or two people sitting on the sidelines going, I don't play team stuff, because that's not going to actually get good team outcomes and high performance. So we need everyone actively collaborating and working together to deliver outcomes. So that's our fifth step. Our sixth step is we need to actually be able to challenge each other and to deal with conflict. So this is two parts of the same piece. We need to have, in teams, we need to be able to challenge each other and say, hey, that's not good enough. Hey, could we do this differently? But also we need to be able to deal with the conflict that naturally arises in teams and actually handle that effectively. The next step that we need to have in place is we need to have good communication. So upwards, downwards, sideways, across. The communication needs to be open and transparent. And I say that very specifically. It's got to be open and transparent. The backstabbing, the talking behind people's backs erodes team effectiveness and gets in the way. So we have to bring about an openness in the communications and a transparency around, hey, what is working and what isn't working. So that's the next aspect. And the last two aspects of our team collaboration, our team effectiveness and high performance are also essential. So we need to be good at improving things, getting things better, checking in with that continuous improvement piece. If you can get to full innovation, fantastic. But a lot of organizations battle and a lot of teams battle to get to true innovation. But continuous improvement is essential. If you're not continuously improving, you're really going to battle to stay in that high performance zone. And the last aspect of our teams that we need to really nail and nut out is that we need to actually build the culture in the team that is around trust. Now, part of getting to that cultural aspect is having all of those other things in place first. And to some extent, if you've got all of those things in place, then the culture will develop in a healthy way. But we want to actively manage a culture of trust. And as leaders, we need to lead this out. We need to demonstrate our trustworthiness, and we need to build trust. So if you're starting to see it being eroded, you want to deal with that. So when we talk about teams, all of those things need to be in place. And if you want to take a measure of your team against those things, please feel free to hop onto our website, Inspired Development Solutions, and have a look. There's under the resilience area, there's a diagnostic on team resilience that actually measures your team against all of those aspects. So if you want to use a diagnostic to measure your team as a starting point, feel free to jump online and grab it. There's also a copy of that diagnostic in my book, Leader Resilience, as a tool for you to use. So when we talk about teams, remember, if we want to keep them healthy and high performing, we have to manage all of those aspects and have all of those aspects in play. Now, I said I wanted to talk about emotional intelligence. We talked about emotional intelligence in our discussions on the podcast on leader resilience, but I want to talk about it specifically in a team context, because in a team context, emotional intelligence becomes more important because we need everyone to work effectively together. So when we talk about emotional intelligence in teams, not only do we want each of the individuals to have good emotional intelligence, but we also want each pair in the team, each dyadic pair in the team, to be able to work effectively together and have good emotional intelligence. Then we also want the whole team to function together. So we want the whole team to be able to work collaboratively, support each other. So if I can see someone needs some help, I can go and give it to them. So we want our teams to be able to have good emotional intelligence as a team. And then we want them to work effectively with other teams in the organization. So when we talk about team emotional intelligence, it becomes a much bigger aspect of success and as a team. And if we're going to build trust in the team, we need to build emotional intelligence at all of those layers. Now, individually, obviously, we would like our people to be investing in developing that. But as a team, you want to be doing lots of work around emotional intelligence. And that doesn't take sending people off on workshops necessarily, but it does take disciplined work around it. So there's lots of YouTube videos around emotional intelligence, lots of books. You can just use a YouTube video and as a team discuss that, or even lots of team games. You can use a team game to help develop emotional intelligence. You can take the team out and just spend time with them, getting to know each other. You can do team diagnostics. You can do personality diagnostics. So there's lots of tools out there to build emotional intelligence and develop that capacity for people to actually understand each other and be more effective in working together. If you want a high-performing team, you want individuals who are actually contributing effectively to the team's ability to collaborate. Super important to really get that right. Now, when we talk about team emotional intelligence, understand that if we develop team emotional intelligence, we get better decision making. We get better outcomes for our clients, our community, our customers, whoever you work for. in that external space. So we get better results all over, and the research has been clear on this. But please understand that emotional intelligence is not a soft skill. It's probably the hardest skill you'll learn. And unfortunately for most of us, during our years of education, we've actually spent no time developing emotional intelligence. At school, we get very limited. I think some schools are doing more of it now, but my son only finished school a year or two ago, and quite frankly, the level of emotional intelligence training was zero. And reality is that we need to be teaching this earlier. I'm encouraging universities to actually look at putting this into their curriculums. Why? Because if we can help people to develop emotional intelligence alongside their IQ, validating their IQ with a degree, they'd come into the workforce ready to contribute to those people aspects in the workforce. So we need to be if we don't have that in our organizations, we need to be developing it in our teams. And our teams, the more we work together, the more we'll be developing that emotional intelligence, and the more we'll actually encourage people to be the best that they can be. So we need to be building that. And as I say, it's not a soft skill. It's a hard skill. And it's hard when you've got people who've got to the older age group and haven't had any development in this area. In fact, I was with a group just recently, and they were saying to me, why has nobody ever taught us emotional intelligence before? It makes so much sense. We should have been taught this when we were first in the workforce. So we need to be developing emotional intelligence, and your job as a leader is to do this on a regular basis. So it's going to be important that first and foremost you look at yourself and look at whether you've got emotional intelligence and whether you're developing your own emotional intelligence. And again, there's lots of tools for developing that, particularly for leaders. If you ever get a chance to get a 360-degree feedback where you're getting feedback from everyone around you, that's a great opportunity to build your emotional intelligence. But even if you don't have access to that, just sit down and ask people for some feedback. Get feedback. If you want emotional intelligence, you've got to get feedback, and then you've got to reflect on it. I very sadly see leaders who are right towards the end of their careers who've never had any proper systematic feedback, and then are shocked when they're given feedback that they're not a good leader, and they have to really realign themselves. So I encourage you, go find the opportunity to get some feedback, whether it's through a 360-degree process or whatever, but develop your emotional intelligence, because it's super hard to develop emotional intelligence in your team if you haven't got good emotional intelligence. Now, when we talk about emotional intelligence, it's not just about being nice to people. So that notion that we're just going to be nice to everyone and acquiesce, that's good emotional intelligence. I'm sorry, it's not. Good emotional intelligence is that I have the tough conversations, that I surface the things that are getting in the way, and that we actively deal with stuff in the team when it gets in the way of our effectiveness. So if we're going to be effective at building teams, we have to develop that emotional intelligence in our teams, in ourselves, and in the way we do our work as team members. So with that said, let me repeat very simply. If you want a high-performing team, you've got to work at it. You've got to help your team through the forming stage, into the norming stage, through into the performing stage. Once you've got to performing, you've got to stay there and not end up in conformity and have to transform. Also, if you want to build your team's capability, you need to have clear vision and goals. You need to have a focus on results. You need to have really clear roles and responsibilities. Leadership needs to be in place. You need to have active collaboration where people are working actively to build relationships. Need to be good at conflict handling and challenge in your team. Need to have good communication strategies, both upwards and downwards, that are transparent and open. And you must have the adaptability to continuously improve. Out of that, you will start to build trust and build a culture that's trusting, but you need to then work on that trust. And to deliver all of that, good emotional intelligence is the foundation of that, at all levels in your team. So I encourage you to go work with your teams and systematically build their capability. And then you'll have great performance, and you'll get a 30% uplift in the performance in the team if you can deliver that. In a generation where, it's hard to find people, this is also an important strategy for retaining people and getting that additional effort put into your team. So I encourage you to build your team and enjoy the journey of building team effectiveness. Thank you for your time today.